Now, consistent with a prior unanimous consent request to allow members of the full committee who are not members of the subcommittee to ask questions of our two witnesses, we will proceed to recognize those members. However, I want them to know that I am going to rigidly employ the 5-minute rule with those 4 members, and I urge you, if you want an answer from the witnesses, not to have a 5-minute statement with a question at the 5-minute point, because you will not be receiving an answer, because we have Speaker Gingrich waiting for us in the anteroom, and each of you will be given 5 minutes. So please try to give the witnesses time to answer your question in the 5-minute time period. We'll begin by recognizing the gentleman from California, Mr. Radonovich.
Thank you, Chairman Markey, and I want to welcome Mr. Vice President and Senator to the committee hearing. I was born and raised in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, right next to Yosemite, and this debate, listening to this debate is very interesting, but I'm very intimate with forest policy, forest management practices in the Sierra Nevada mountains, very intimately involved with California drought and what's going on out there. And I can tell you that the things that more adversely affect California's water supply and forest management practices in California is environmental alarmism, and it's resulted in some very bad management of our national forests, has led to fuel buildups, more intense fires that leave the area more devastated. In the San Joaquin in water supply in California, it's due to 3 different lawsuits that have restricted water deliveries to agriculture for a delta smelt, a worthless little worm in the delta that needs to go the way of the dinosaur. And they've shut pumps down and restricted water deliveries to California over that thing, when what's eating it is a striped bass, which is a non-native species in the delta, and yet the collaboration between environmentalists and sport fishermen have led to the dealing with the truth of the situation in the delta. As a result of that, there are 0 water deliveries to my farmers. It's costing 40,000 to 60,000 jobs this year and a $6 billion hit to our economy. That is not global warming. That is not global warming that's causing problems in our forests. It's the result of bad policy because of environmental alarmism. And I think that current debate over global warming and cap and trade is another result of environmental alarmism. And I want to, you know, there's a couple of transitions we've made in the history of the country. We had the light bulb came up when we needed to move from candle power to light bulbs. We had cars. Finally, Henry Ford came up with a car. We needed to move from horses to cars. Hell, even when we went to the moon, we had a moon to shoot for. But you're saying on fossil fuels and setting up a scheme, frankly, that's causing us to leave fossil fuels for an unidentified replacement. And the notion that you can do that on renewable energies and the technology that we have right now, to me, is disingenuous. The fact that you can rely on this transition with solar and wind energy and enhance the economy and reduce our reliance on foreign fuels, that to me is the biggest fraud that's being perpetrated in this country right now. I think that there's ample evidence that the planet's warming. I think it's debatable whether it's man-made cause. I think that if you want this, if you're even concerned about the world coming to an end, there's nothing that we can do to prevent that from happening and that kind of alarmism. My problem is that you can't make this transition without breaking the back of the economy of the United States unless you have a new field that you can jump to. I'd much rather spend billions of dollars that you're planning on spending identifying a new energy source, and then let's identify that, and then we can make the transition to the new energy source. But I got to tell you, your notion that this planet's going to fry in 30 years, this Congress doesn't know what's going to happen in a week, let alone 30, 40 years. I think if the way to address this problem is to put our efforts behind identifying a reliable replacement for fossil fuels, and you've not identified it so far, and any transition that you think you're going to make is going to be so heavily subsidized that you're going to bankrupt this country on this notion of cap and trade. I am all for efficiencies. We have air problems in California, renewable energies, things that keep the air clean out there. But unless you come up with a replacement to fossil fuels, you're not going to be able to make that transition. And I think that aside from the sky is falling, we're going to be dead in 30 years, and the planet's going to burn up, I think the reasonable approach to this problem is innovation, efficiency, a robust economy, which you will destroy with cap and trade, and moving toward a new energy source that we can all start to rely on.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've said what I want to say.
I know you have, and but I think I'm going to modify my earlier statement.
Could I respond briefly?
And allow the witnesses. No further interventions by the members after 5 minutes will be allowed. Mr. Vice President.
Congressman, I think we actually do have an excellent idea of where the renewable energy can come from.
If you would explain the cost.
Very large.
You're going to bankrupt this country.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Well, so I should be able to respond.
The gentleman is going to. You did not give him time within your 5 minutes, which was the request which I made of the gentleman as now being given this time under a unanimous consent request. The Vice President sought several times to gain your attention to answer your question within that 5-minute period. You did not choose to recognize it. The Vice President is now...
If he would then give me the benefit of explaining the cost of this program to the American people, then I will.
Answer your question.
And I'd love to hear that response from the Vice President.
Vice President is going to answer your question. Thank you.
I'll just say briefly that I think we do know pretty well exactly what the sources of renewable energy can be. And the cost is coming down almost as rapidly as in the early days of computer chips when you got that Moore's Law curve. We're beginning to see something like that in photovoltaics, concentrating solar thermal, photovoltaics, wind power, geothermal, efficiency, and conservation are, I think, now ready to go. So well, let me just make one other point. Enough sunlight falls on the land surface of the Earth in 45 minutes to provide a full year's worth of energy use for the entire planet. And the engineers and scientists in this country have been making fantastic breakthroughs in how to innovate more efficient versions of it.
Okay. Chairman's time has expired.
Nothing that I said this morning, I don't think that my colleague either, is predicated on we're going to abandon fossil fuels. It's more how can we do it more efficiently and in such a way consume them so as to have minimal damage to the environment and to health. So we're always going to have that. But we put such emphasis as we can to encourage wind, solar, and the like, but it's not going to transplant fossil fuels.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to welcome Vice President Gore and Senator Warner, and to thank you for your service as well and for the leadership you've provided on this issue, which has really brought about the consensus that we have in this country that we must act today. I guess I'd ask both of you. Many in the committee have complained about the 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and in poor communities especially. The American Public Power Association in panel yesterday recommended 15% reduction by 2025. Is that good enough? And what would you suggest to help communities and power companies reach that 25% that they don't think they can reach today?
No, I don't think that would be good enough at all. The committee draft already represents a significant compromise compared to what others in the global negotiation are already doing and what the scientific community says is advisable. I support the committee bill regardless of that, because I think it's an excellent bill and will set in motion a process of change that will lead to steeper reductions in a way that benefits our economy tremendously. But to cut back from the reductions in this bill, I think would cross a line that we should not cross at all.
Did you want to add anything, Senator Warner?
No, but again, I come back to a basic premise I have. Let's draft the legislation so we're directing ourselves towards resolution of the problems of how we take our existing and additional energy sources and do it efficiently and healthy. I tried as best I could not to let the Senate bill begin to be a welfare or to help the needy. Those needs are there. They are definite, and how well you know that. But this legislation is directed towards a new energy policy.
But that being said, and this was my second question anyway, there are many communities, especially African American, Hispanic American, Native American, that have not been really benefiting from our economy as it is today. Do you think that our new green economy can be a vehicle to help close the gaps for those communities and bring them into the mainstream? And I'd ask both of you that question.
I would say to those groups that you have identified, who are just as has every right to the clean air and clean water and good food as do I, that this bill is directed to help them improve their quality of life, no matter what their economic status may be.
Van Jones, who is now a part of the administration in charge of green jobs, is the most eloquent spokesman I know on this point. But just to give a couple of examples, this bill will have a lot of incentives to unleash many jobs in insulating homes, changing out lighting and windows, and those jobs can't be outsourced. They're in the community, and they're good jobs, and there are a lot of them.
Thank you. It's been mentioned several times throughout the hearings that the benefits from addressing the concerns discussed in the bill, as both of you have basically just said, will over the long term buffer the cost of the American people. The bill discusses the necessity for the federal government to establish measures to assist natural resources adapt to climate change. Are there one or two specific strategies that we should focus our attentions on? And additionally, to what extent will support of international adaptation strategies, such as preventing deforestation, assist in reducing the pressures levied on the United States and territories?
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops issued a very eloquent statement this past week, and part of their statement supports robust measures for adaptation, and both here at home and internationally. And I think that's very crucial, and I commend the authors of the bill for including it, and I agree with you that it's very important to do it. We look at the fact that poor and disadvantaged people in our country, as well as in the rest of the world, are those most likely to be victims of this. Indeed, many already have been, and so adaptation is a crucial part of the response.
Okay. Gentlelady's time has expired. The Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of you for your patience today. Vice President Gore, you and I have had the opportunity to represent some of the same people from a truly wonderful state. And you talked a little bit about people have to have trust in what you're doing. And I think you know that this bill is going to fundamentally change the way America works, and it's going to affect families. We've all talked about how it affects individuals and what it's going to do to their budgets and what it's going to do to jobs in this country. And given the magnitude of those changes, I think it's really important that no suspicion or shadow fall on the foremost advocates of climate change legislation. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of clear the air about your motives and maybe set the record straight for some of your former constituents. And I've got an article from October 8th, New York Times Magazine, about a firm called Kleiner Perkins, a capital firm called Kleiner Perkins. Are you aware of that company?
Well, yes, I'm a partner at Kleiner Perkins.
So you're a partner in Kleiner Perkins. Okay. Now, they have invested about $1 billion in 40 companies that are going to benefit from cap-and-trade legislation. So is the legislation that we are discussing here today, is that something that you are going to personally benefit from?
I believe that the transition to a green economy is good for our economy and good for all of us. And I have invested in it, but every penny that I have made, I have put right into a nonprofit, the Alliance for Climate Protection, to spread awareness of why we have to take on this challenge. And Congresswoman, if you believe that the reason I have been working on this issue for 30 years is because of greed, you don't know me.
No, sir, I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions that have been asked of me and individuals, constituents that were seeking a point of clarity. So I am asking
I understand exactly what you're doing, Congresswoman. Everybody here does.
And, well, are you willing to divest yourself of any profit? Does all of it go to a not-for-profit that is an educational not-for-profit?
Every penny that I have made has gone to it. Every penny, from the movie, from the book, from any investments in renewable energy. I've been willing to put my money where my mouth is. Do you think there's something wrong with being active in business in this country?
I am simply asking for clarification.
I'm proud of
the
it.
Relationship.
I'm proud of it.
Thank you, and I appreciate the answer. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back, and I will, for the record, say that for 8 years I sat next to Al Gore on this committee, and on every one of these issues he took a stand. He took a stand decades ago that is identical to the stand which he is taking as he sits here before our committee today. And there's one thing that I can say about the Vice President is that he was a visionary. He identified these issues. He forced this committee and the Senate to consider it long before it was ready to deal with it. And his time has come on this issue. A prophet is being honored in this committee today, but by the world. He won a Nobel Prize for his work on this subject. The world has come to recognize that, and I think that his service to our country and our planet is something that I think is absolutely unchallengeable. We will complete the questioning of our special guests with the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Sutton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses. I regret that that this very serious subject sometimes has turned into something that has resulted in sort of personal and somewhat sometimes partisan appearing attacks. And Senator Warner, if I could just begin with you. You spent a good deal of time serving this country in the United States Senate, and one of the questions that I have as a member sitting over here and certainly dedicated to trying to find a way to work this out. I come from Ohio. It's a challenging issue for us, but I believe in the science, and I believe in the merits of the potential. I do worry about the transition, and we can talk about that. So I'm looking for solutions to find a way to get from here to there. But, Senator, in the Senate, I'm concerned about the Senate and whether or not they will pass a significant global climate change bill. Do you foresee that anytime in the near future, based on your experience?
I would have to respond that I think the Senate will, in a very serious and conscientious way, review such legislation as may be generated by this committee, and hopefully will, in my own judgment. And I've learned that the distinguished chairperson of our committee, former committee, Senator Boxer, is laying plans possibly to introduce a bill in the Senate. I do believe the time has come that both parties will conscientiously work on this issue, but quite frankly, I think it would be not in my province to try and predict what that outcome will be. We're at the basic threshold of the legislative process, going through this very important and extraordinary hearing agenda. We took 14 months to cover much of the same territory. But nevertheless, I have faith in the Congress to objectively and honestly look at this situation and hopefully come up with a bipartisan solution.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Gore, again, thank you for your work on this issue and for the consensus that has finally come to be. And I just want to talk to you just very briefly, or get your opinion very briefly. You mentioned in your testimony about the need for coal miners to have access to a job. And the question is kind of twofold. It would, well, threefold perhaps. How would that work? And how fast would that happen? And are there other workers who are going to be similarly displaced who should be given that kind of guarantee as well? Thank you.
Yes, I think there ought to be attention to that, absolutely. The bill already devotes considerable attention to it, but I've always had the position that anyone displaced by this has a right, not just to job training, but to a job. And I think that we have to manage the transition in a way that takes care of those who I think society as a whole benefits. I think the economy grows, but those who are especially affected, I think they have a right to it.
How about employees in manufacturing plants and that may be impacted by some of the things that we heard discussed here today in the moment? See, my concern is that while I believe in the potential of green jobs, and we have a very different problem in Ohio than my dear friend Congressman Inslee described it as the causes of global warming, or not the causes, but global warming is causing job loss for him. You know, in this moment. So he wants to stave off that, and I understand and respect that, and I am with him in trying to address that. Mm-hmm. But we also have a lot of our folks, they care about this issue. They care about the environment. Yeah. But if you don't have a job today, the concerns of this bigger issue and where we need to go become very difficult to address. When you have kids, you can't, can't get what they need and put food on the table. So it becomes almost a luxury to try and deal with that.
Yeah, and I understand your question very well. It's very well put. And we would still face that challenge if the legislation didn't pass. In fact, we have been facing that challenge. I believe this bill will make it better. I'll give you an example from Ohio. There's a company that famously, very proud of the fact that they made the giant bolts for the Golden Gate Bridge. And they went through some hard times and had to lay a lot of people off. They're now hiring people, or have been, to make windmills, to make parts for windmills. And I think it's a good example of how new jobs in Ohio will be created, are being created by the shift to green energy, and will be created in significantly larger numbers with the incentives and motivations in this bill.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Let's complete this way. Let's ask each of you to give a summary statement to the committee before you leave. It's been our honor to have you with us here today. Could we begin with you, Senator Warner?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say very briefly that the Congress today in this hearing has served their respective constituents well. We've had an open and free debate. We've clearly expressed to one another our concerns about this legislation, but it, I hope, renews our strength to go back and counsel with our constituents and listen to our constituents and seek out a way to lead. The country has to lead on this issue. Thank the chair. Having been a chairman myself, I know the challenges, and I think you fulfilled them very well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Vice President Gore.
Mr. Chairman, I began by noting how it brings a lot of emotions for me to walk in at the beginning of the hearing this morning and be once again in this room where I spent 8 years. I've sat through many hearings like this one in this chamber, many markups like the one you're about to embark upon. Having gone through many bills, I have to tell you that I am extremely impressed with what you and Chairman Waxman and others have done in really drilling deeply into so many aspects, virtually all of the aspects of this issue. And I want to compliment you and Chairman Waxman and the others for the work product you have produced. I know that in the committee process there will be debates, there will be changes and so forth. That's the way it works. I would urge you during that process to stay on this side of the line that preserves the effectiveness of this legislation, and I know you will. My main point is I compliment you on the bill. It is an honor to appear before this committee, agree or disagree with the views of some. I appreciate the questions and the exchanges, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's good to be back.
Thank you. And it's our honor to have two of our greatest citizens of our country to appear before the committee today. With the thanks of the committee and our country, we will take a brief recess while our two witnesses are able to leave and before we introduce Speaker Gingrich. Thank you. We're 2-minute recess.